Okay, we're here in Calais. We're in front of the warehouse of Salam. Salam is an organization that's here in Calais and also Grand Saint, helping the refugees. We're going inside to talk to a woman named Maddie. Maddie's British. She's starting an organization that's keeping track of all the human rights violations in order to present to governments, the French government, the American government. And we're gonna see how she's doing today. It's sunny. Thank you to my friend Evelynne who's filming me. We hope the sun holds. It's much better for the refugees outside, obviously, if it's sunny, as opposed to yesterday it was rainy and cold. So, also yesterday the police came and raided the camp in Grand Saint, so we hope people are okay. There was a young woman who broke her wrist, so we're gonna see how people are doing today.
I think that there is a real issue in terms of the communication with people. So obviously the action yesterday by the police was an intention to take people on buses to reception centres to adequate accommodation. So obviously with the view to try to get them to claim asylum in France. However, that's just what we're suspecting. There's no information giving to people. I think that there's no pressure, there's no kind of monitoring of the behaviour or the way in which these actions are taking place. And my personal opinion, and the opinion of others, is that the attitude of the state at the moment is very much that what we need to do is to make this problem invisible. Yeah. There is no problem, we're not doing anything, there's nobody here to make it go away.
Yeah. I was told by a woman that she was told by the police, a refugee told me that the police said they were going to take away her children, and they did take away the children while they were on the bus and then at the detention center, and they didn't give the children back for 24 hours.
Yeah, so there's a lot of threatening behaviour and a lot of threatening language that's being used by the police to force people onto the buses. Obviously, a lot of this stuff is kind of either from the individual that has experienced it, but there's huge gaps in our knowledge and information of what's going on. But yeah, they are forcing people onto buses, they are threatening them with, actions as you described, to try to get people to do something. Whereas really, I think the reality is if they were to give people the correct information, then probably the chances are that some of those people would willingly go.
Got it.
So it's a lot of intimidation, a lot of threats, and a lot of violence.
So the way the system works in Europe is it's called the Eurodac system, and when you arrive you're supposed to give your fingerprints. So obviously that didn't work for a long time in Greece and Italy because everybody was unprepared. So what's happening is as people cross Europe to reach their destination, they are often forcibly fingerprinted. So there is a sort of a system for the entirety of Europe that exists. So for example, somebody gets to France and tries to claim asylum in France, they may have had their fingerprints forcibly taken in Serbia or Hungary, or it could be anywhere, and that's a reason to remove that person and send them back to that country.
And you said you heard reports of people, when you say forcibly fingerprinted.
Yeah, I mean, God, there's two examples. One is a friend of mine who's now in the UK with his family, which we managed to get over legally, but he was detained in Bulgaria and was held in prison for a number of days, and his fingerprints were taken during that time. So it could be physically, or it could be that people are not given information as to why they're being asked to do that. And then the second example is we heard reports at the Belgian border that men had hoods put over them and that police physically made them give fingerprints. I mean, again, there's loads of allegations of that happening in all different ways in all different places. And it really, the problem is that a lot of, when it comes to first countries, so Greece or Italy, transfers back to Greece are actually stopped at the moment because Greece can't cope, but there is talk of that kind of starting up again. But this is people that are trying to reach relatives, or really just I guess in some ways as well, it's about spreading the number of people across the continent rather than sending people back to countries that are really inadequate or unable to deal with them, or just where they don't want to be. I think everyone has a choice about where they want to be.
Yeah, all right, I'm gonna cut that. So we just cut the interview so that you could get a report from a young woman who's working for the Women's Refugee about I was in Grand Saint yesterday, so apparently there's some more police action that happened.
Yeah, so obviously there was the big eviction yesterday where people were put on buses, but then it's just been reported that all evening and overnight there were a number of CRS vans there and a cell van to arrest people. We don't really know numbers of people or kind of how that happened, but there's also a large police presence there at the moment, so it's sort of like they're hunting people, so looking for people and trying to really, quite aggressively and forcibly clear that area.
And one of the techniques they use is to spray pepper on?
Yeah, so again, you know, for example, there's a family there, and their tent and sleeping bags were removed from them, and they were sprayed with pepper spray or tear gas, which renders them obviously completely useless. So removing people's possessions and destroying them.
And what will the family do? What do they hope the family? What do they want? Do they want to check the fingerprints and send them back, maybe, or do they?
I don't know. I mean, I think what's happened is that obviously these people have gone on buses. They're trying to give people accommodation, but without giving them information about the fact that that's what they're trying to do. We've now heard that they've told people that have arrived in these centres that their asylum process in France begins today, so they have to claim asylum now, which for those that want to is great, but I guess for those that don't, that are trying to reach relatives in the UK or have a claim in England, is not so good. And this family that is left that did not get on the buses, I mean, maybe if they'd known that that's what was happening or that's where they were going, that's something that they would have chosen to do. So there is nowhere for them to go. I think really this is about the information and the way in which people are treated. I think if you treat people with respect and dignity and you give them information, then they're much more likely to make that informed decision. And I think the other thing as well to say about Dunkirk is that a lot of people will say, well, why can't they just claim in France? And I think people have a real cultural affinity with the UK. These are Iraqi Kurdish. The UK obviously has been for a very long time involved in Iraq. There's a real cultural affinity. Many people have relatives in the UK who left during the Iraq War. They're trying to reach them. And the other thing to say is obviously the smuggler control in Dunkirk at Grand Synth, that people have deals with people. There is a lot of pressure, a lot of manipulation, a lot of bribery, and a lot of kind of intimidation that goes on by the smugglers to persuade people or essentially force them to go to the UK and to pay them to do that, because there isn't anything available otherwise.
Wow. And I've also the language barrier too. I've been told, people speak English.
Totally. I mean, again, this kind of relationship between the UK and Iraqi Kurdish that, loads of people speak English. They want to get a job, they want to provide for their family, they want to go to a place where they can do that as easily as they can, which is that language. And again, as I said before, this is about our responsibility as a country, as the UK, that we were responsible, as well as the US, for the conflict in Iraq. The situation that we created is why these people are leaving. So do our bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just asking Zelia, she's moving out this way, I'm just asking her what happened last night. She says it's crazy. She doesn't really have time to talk because she's trying to get things to the families.
Italy to Marseille, and then Marseille you took the train.
Yeah. Marseille after Paris, after night.
Oh good, you came back. Record.
Sarah, food cake.
Food cake. Do you want a biscuit or do you want some of this?
Sorry.
Do you want a biscuit or do you want this? Some of this? Or do you prefer this?
Tired?
Yeah, it's the police. So we just walked through the pathway from Salam, and the police are still over at the camp. So we've got supplies here and what have you, and we're going to go back to Salam, the warehouse, because we can't do anything when the police are there and the refugees are hiding in the woods.
I don't know why I always feel comfortable in these kind of places, because it's where you see, it's going to sound cliche, but cliche is cliche for a reason. But it's actually, I think like this is a really good for volunteers, for example, because somehow you learn. It's because I do that for a long time. So here's not the first time in Brazil. I used to do a lot of work too related to that. So I think for people that never volunteered, it's a great situation, because even though you don't want to do this for your entire life, you learn how to realize how grateful you should be for your things. And this is really important for us as humans, because we need to have empathy. So what for me was always the thing is that, to be honest, this is what gives me strength. And it's hard, it's painful. You have to realize that you're not gonna save the world, even though you want it. Because if you do think, oh, I'm gonna save these people and everything, all this pressure is going to go for you home, and you're gonna fail, and you're gonna be frustrated, and this brings a lot of problems to people because you're not gonna save. But you have to understand that at least at that moment, at that day, or maybe that year, I don't know for how long you decide to do that, you gave your best, and you tried, and you make mistakes sometimes because sometimes you're not prepared. I'm not gonna say that during when I was here, I went home and I cried. I cried because you feel bad. You feel bad for the situation they are. You think about them every time that it rains, because here rains a lot. And every time I go to sleep or I wake up with the rain, I'm like, I can't help on not thinking on them. But what I have to think is like to separate lives, and that tomorrow I'll be there to do the best I can and to be strong for it. But I think, like, for example, for people that comes for volunteers here, it's really good because they give a lot of help and they're very welcome. Like, doesn't matter if you don't think it's weak to be crying, and don't try more. Like, come talk to us, and they're very open to that. And I think this is important too, because sometimes we're like, oh, I'm weak, I shouldn't be here, and all those things. You doubt yourself, but it's hard. It's a hard situation where you have to face so many things, and to be a woman sometimes is hard. To be honest, like, to be a woman, you need to again have a space and to construct this respect. We like deal with different cultures. How do you deal with that if you not use it? So it's a process that it's really hard, but at the same time it's a learning. So yesterday my friends and I, we were talking about this, and this girl said, oh, but I'm having a hard time with some people from the Middle East. And I was like, yeah, do you know why you're having a hard time? Because we come to them as us, and not we come as Westerns, we come as this idea. But we have to realize that when we go, we have to, it's a different culture, so you can't have your eyes, you have somehow have different eyes. So for example, the fight for women in the Middle East, it's a different fight. It's not backward, or it's not worse or better, it's just different fight. So it's like things when you hear, you have to think about it.
My chauffeur, my guide, my producer.
Last 5 hours.
All right, we're on the road, we're heading out. It was a very informative trip, Evelynne. Thank you very much. Wow, there's a lot.
Amazing.
A lot of work.
In your hour of need.